thank you all for joining this ControlUp Community Meetup. We're really excited. These things are very informal. We want to have a conversation with you. We want to teach you. We want to share with you. We want to learn from you, right? And that's what the community is all about in general. So, we have a ControlUp community. It's run in Slack, and inside there, you can do about anything. You can ask us anything, just like here. You'll be able to stay up to date on what's new. Also, we have our beta, so you can see what's coming soon, and meet a bunch of great folks. We have a bunch of product managers in there. Sam's in there, which is all we need and more. And we'll get to that if there's a question about Sam. So please
Just
come
the
and
one.
join us. Just one. So please come and join us if you're not. ControlUpCommunity.com. So that's basically the PowerPoints. This is one of our meetups. We do a monthly now. If you have ideas for the future, if you have requests, wants, desires, please let me know. Please share them with me. db@controlup.com. Thank you, Eugene, for that email address. db@controlup.com. And anything you want, we'll make sure that happens. On that note, that's it. I'm really excited. Looking forward to this. I have no agenda today. This is up to you. So the other slide I had was, if you have questions, please use the questions piece, which if you hover over the bottom, you'll see both the chat, which we know about, and the Q&A section. So if you have any questions, because this is from you, or for you, by you, and these guys just answer. We do have a few questions that were submitted in advance. I made sure that I had a couple. So I have one that I really want to ask, and then we'll get to your question. So again, use that questions piece if you have any questions for us. We have three folks here. Sam, say hi.
Hi.
We have Simon with us, who was with us last time. Simon, say hello.
Hello.
And then we have the one and the only Eugene, who's been with us a few times. So that said, hey guys, for my first question today, how do you see we'll get to a big one, right? How do you see the future of virtual desktops? Are these cloud PC things real? Are they here today, or will VDI continue? Right, it's the giant question. What's going on?
Who starts? Simon.
I don't mind starting if you want me to start. I've been deploying VDI for as long as I can remember, and many people that I've met along the way, including many of the people on this call, have made a career out of VDI. But it took me a while to realize that the future of VDI as we know it might not be the future. And I had a light bulb moment probably at the end of last year, which for some people might be a little bit late, and for some people they may still argue against me. But I think we are looking at a future where cloud PCs dominate the world when it comes to desktop virtualization. And it's taken me a long time to get my head around that, because a persistent one-to-one cloud PC as it is right now doesn't make a great deal of sense when you've spent the last 20 years using machine creation services, deploying non-persistent, doing pooled desktops, trying to scale up and scale down and do clever things with Citrix, and then with Horizon, and now with Nerdio. It doesn't feel right for me to say that actually cloud PCs are the future. But I think in the same way that I've got rid of all of my DVDs and I've got rid of my CDs and I've stopped loading my CDs onto my iPod and any other silly example that I could give you, the truth is that it's just going to become so easy and so cheap for me to spin up a cloud PC in the future that I think many, many organizations will move that way. I'm not talking about this year nor next year, and probably not even 2026. All the customers I speak to, lots are staying on Citrix, lots are staying on VMware Horizon, lots are looking at AVD, but ever so slowly and surely, I think the world will move to a cloud PC. And so VDI, as I know it, or at least I refer to it, I think come 2027 will be a different. We'll be in a different place. That's my view.
You think it's that soon to cloud PC, cloud PC in 2027?
Yeah. Look, I mean, you've only got to look at the numbers, right? There's 50 million virtualized seats out there. Microsoft believe that they can go after 100 million virtualized seats, which means they're not just going to be taking on the existing virtualization market, but also expanding it out. Now, if you go into some of the largest accounts that have deployed Citrix and Horizon, my gut and what I hear at the moment from customers is that many of them are not moving, right? So large banks that have got 50, 60, 80, 120,000 seats of Citrix deployed, they're staying with Citrix and they're signing 3-year deals right now. And so those 3-year deals are going to take us through to 2027. And so, you've got to look at those numbers and think that business isn't going to suddenly disappear anytime soon. But by the time we get there, and we get to say 2027, I think the cost of a cloud PC will be significantly cheaper. Microsoft, I think, have deliberately not gone in and said, let's try and do it as cheap as possible. They've said, let's build it to a level of quality and performance, and let's worry about how we might reduce the price afterwards. And so I don't know. By the time we get to 2027, a cloud PC might only cost you $25 a month as opposed to the $40 a month it costs you now, and Amazon are going to compete in that space as well. So, and if you look at what Microsoft are doing, they've realigned their teams at the start of this year or the middle of this year, at the start of their financial year. They're all gung-ho on, AVD and Windows 365. They've got virtualization specialists. They've got sales virtualization specialists in place now. They're gonna go after this market fairly aggressively. Is my thought.
Sam, do you think that it's technically possible? I mean, will PC be ready for the enterprise in that short of
So
time?
I think it's already kind of ready. I see a lot of customers adopting cloud PC. For most of them, it's like a tactical solution. Like as mentioned by Simon, it's so easy that you need something for tomorrow. I think we had COVID. If cloud PC would have been better at that time, there would be like an explosion of it because you needed something very fast, no infrastructure to set up, whatever. It was like the perfect answer. And I see a lot of customers saying, okay, even like for short-term project, I will deploy a few hundred of a cloud PC. And if it's longer term, I would maybe do AVD and I will do like some kind of on-prem versus cloud hosting because I need to still have like things on premises. But yeah, I see like technically it's there. I think depending on the use cases, customer will pick the right tool. It's a new tool. Like VDI has always been, and VDI like including SBAs and SBCs. It's a niche use case. Like everyone has a laptop, everyone has a desktop, and some have on top of that a VDI. So yeah, I see Microsoft thinks that it will be like they will grow the market share of virtualized desktops, which I think they can. And yeah, that's an interesting moment for everyone in the industry because yeah, we still have bills to pay, so we need to work. So that's great that VDI is still there. Thank you, VDI.
Well, that
This
actually
is,
brings up other questions. But Eugene,
oh
you
yeah, yeah. So there's like every time that there's a story behind something like that, and there's the narrative, right? And I'm always like, I'm always passionate about looking at the numbers and seeing if the numbers are saying anything. So I started together with our friend Andrew Wood. We are getting something together, hopefully to publish soon. But it's actually interesting. I've been looking at some trends. I don't want to show the actual charts, but just really roughly, if you can see here, maybe.
Yeah, we
Is it-
can.
Yeah, you
Yeah, we're
can see.
good.
Yeah, okay. So if this is like pre-pandemic, okay, if this is like 2019, and this is us today, okay, So I was looking at some customers, measuring like the extent of like the size of their VDI deployments in terms of concurrent user sessions. And what happened was, since the beginning of the pandemic till the you know at the highest level in the pandemic, it went about 50%, right? Or should I say 100%, right? So about twice, right? So the loads went up about 2021, almost 100% since pre-pandemic levels. And now we are about over here. So about like halfway between where we were pre-pandemic and the highest point during the pandemic, right? So it kind of cooled down. And what I'm saying, like what I'm actually drawing here, this is the size of VDI deployments for existing customers, right? So only for those that persisted in the sample throughout the entire period, right? Not taking into account any new customers and not taking into account anyone who stopped using VDI altogether. Only the ones who persisted with VDI through this whole period of time, right? So I think it's a good way of like looking at what are people doing with their existing loads. Now we know that enterprise software dies hard, right? It takes a while. There's nothing quick happening in that area, and there are like I think the pandemic and this climb over here since 2019 until 21. That was perhaps the most dramatic hike that this industry ever saw, and now it's cooled down like about half that, right? It has cooled down. Not to the pre-pandemic levels, but about halfway, right? So what that says to me is that we're kind of leveling to this, to the scale that is probably going to persist. I don't know, it's like Simon says, about 3 years from now, 4 years from now. But from what we're seeing with all the stories about VMware and Broadcom, licensing disputes and the things that are happening with customers and Citrix changes and the stories that are happening there are probably going to actually we're going to see the effects of that in 3 or 4 years at least. So for now, at least it's not going away in any rapid fashion. I do see this cool off as an effect of just the pandemic being over and people scaling back to whatever's going on. We don't see any significant growth. I mean, I do want to make this clear, right? So the trend that we're seeing in terms of sales and expansion and new customers, we are of course seeing this, right? So we're seeing more and more new customers joining, and monitoring more and more VDI environments. But if we just look at the ones that are with us for the entire time, right, they are not growing internally in terms of their VDI. Okay, so that's the takeaway for now, is that anyone who already has VDI doesn't seem to be growing it much, right? And of course, it also has to do with the size of the business, because the businesses tend to stay more or less the same. If it's not a startup, it's a hospital somewhere, it's probably going to stay the same size, right? So this is what we're seeing in the market. And probably I agree with the viewpoint that it's probably not going away anytime like real soon. And the fact that the cloud alternative is catching up, it's evident, it's there, definitely there.
I think people have got more choice now, Doug, than they've ever had, right? I mean, you almost could argue that back in the day, you either went with a fat client PC, or you went with a fat client desktop because you went into the office every day. You went with a laptop and a VPN, or you went with Citrix. And it might have been a 90-10 rule within any organization, but you got to add in the mix. To Sam's point, some people are using protocols, smart cards, scanners. There's a lot of those things that the mature VDI solutions nailed quite some time ago. So that's going to keep some of those business functions on that. But then you do have people that spin up 500, 1,500 cloud PCs, and they've got a little bit of AVD. I mean, I was in a customer last week, right? They've got 4 different virtualization technologies in place, and they're now looking at an enterprise browser as well, right?
Well,
And so I think people have just got more choice than they've ever had.
that's interesting. I was going to ask a question. You know, as you start moving, as we start moving into this cloud PC hosted, you know, cloud Microsoft centric world, does it kill off our ecosystem? Does it kill off all the vendors and solutions and innovation that we're used to? With more choice, it seems like no. Um,
Well, I would suggest that we are probably fortunate that we operate across any platform, right? And I would have thought that there are other vendors that do other things that can do the same, right? So any vendor that allows you to move easy, migrate easy, and live in a hybrid world. And I'm not talking about hybrid working, I'm talking about hybrid deployment options, is going to succeed, right? So anyone that offers security across all of those different platforms, anyone that does management across those different platforms, decks across those different platforms, you know, we live in probably a far more heterogeneous world. There's a good word for you. I think Citrix used to use that one.
I love it.
Also in a sense, I think like the on-prem VDI was a general rehearsal for cloud PC and for DAS, right? And for the rest of the technologies, because you couldn't just leap from you know, from physical machines or
Yeah.
whatever from
I mean, it's been an
mainframes, right?
evolution forever.
Yeah,
It's been an
Richard makes
evolution
a good
forever.
Richard makes a good point in the chat there, right? Every time I hear the end of on-premise VDI, I think about the fact there's still mainframes in existence. And
They're not only in existence, they're like in the critical path of the number one critical industry in the world in terms of like
right,
banking.
right.
You know, like,
Here's the problem, right? Because at the end of the day, why are we having this conversation about where the workspace is delivered from? 9 times out of 10, it's actually dependent on where the application backend is sitting. And if you can't move, you know, anyone can spin up a desktop in the cloud. It's super simple. And if you're only using Office 365 or Google, then go for your life. It's great. But yeah, if your application is still on-prem, then, you know, you got to ask yourself some serious questions about, you know, where your workspace is going to be delivered from.
Yeah, or where your application data is going to live.
Right.
So, okay. So, any other comments before we move to the next question?
just about the ecosystem and the vendors in this whole area. I think that some solutions are definitely going to become obsolete, but probably they would have become obsolete anyway, and not everybody would have succeeded even inside the VDI realm, right? It's always a survival of the fittest. But I think for a lot of the companies that I'm seeing in our ecosystem, definitely in like the monitoring space, right? Almost everybody adapts, right? So because the need for observability, for the seeing what's happening and being able to remediate and fix stuff, you know. So that's all that stuff persists. Like it doesn't really matter where the stuff lives. And most of the vendors in those spaces are able, you know, like ourselves, like other competitors, we're able to kind of adapt ourselves and make ourselves relevant for those new markets. You know, like the Dex brand. You know, you can treat it as a branding thing, right? But the Dex, the whole Dex thing is a good example of that, right? It's how traditional monitoring is just changing shapes and changing colors a little bit. But essentially, it's the same people doing that, right? It's the same VDI admins that are still doing that. It's just called a new shiny name, right? And so in that sense, I think the ecosystem is. I won't say it's not going anywhere. It's going places, right? But it's not going away. It's evolving.
It'll be interesting. I mean, if you look at when I was doing Citrix work in the trenches, you had tools to reset modems. Obviously you don't have those anymore, right? And you're going to have new tools, migration tools to lift and shift over to the cloud and stuff. And eventually, we don't need, hopefully we don't need it, but I don't think that's 2027. That'll be, many years. Like you said, you still have mainframes, but there's a lot of things you don't have too. So, yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. We have a question from the audience here, more on the technical side. I want to get to it. VDI poses a challenge with resources. What do you folks recommend for a minimum CPU and RAM per virtual machine?
As much as you can afford. Like it's like I would say, like that's the question we get asked like very, very often. That will like, and the best answer, it depends. Like it will like, as the data needs to be close to the desktop, it like really depend on the application you're going to use. Like as someone mentioned in the chat, like Teams can eat like 4 or 5 gigs of RAM. So if you put only 4 gigs, like it's over. Now, I think the minimum for Windows 11 is 8 gigs of RAM. Like if you don't have 8, you can even not install it. I would not play with Windows 11 with 8 gigs of RAM, like even on a VDI. And we are talking about DEX, on digital employee experience, like all the fancy names. But like if you compare the experience on the laptop with like 12, 16 cores, 32 gigs of RAM, and you provide like a split of a CPU to your user, they are going to suffer. So like VDI has always been like, it's always been a challenge, because like you're consolidating and you want to make the best of your hardware, but it's a question that doesn't have a real answer to me. Like it will depend. You will need to use tooling to do scalability testing, and yeah, that's a complete, like it's a project, and that should be the first step of any VDI project, to be honest.
You can take Sam out of consultancy, but you can't take consultancy out of Sam. That's he's always in the consultant mode, man. It's like it always depends, doesn't it?
Ah.
So
Always depends.
so no, but the thing is, yeah, I totally agree, and I think there's like two things to my 2 cents to that is that first off, it's like the way it was asked is kind of a loaded question, right? Because what's the minimum requirement? Well, the minimum requirement is the minimum requirement. It's like whatever you can get away with, right? In terms of a fraction of a CPU or like 2 gigs of RAM, whatever. But the thing is that did you know everybody will notice that there's almost no example of any software of any kind that with when they increase the version number, the resource consumption decreases. That like almost doesn't exist. Like everything bloats over time, right? In terms of the memory it takes, in terms of, I don't know, I just read something about mobile apps, right, where they just took and analyzed some of the mobile apps that are like almost useless, stuff that just does almost nothing and weighs like almost a gig, right? In terms of storage, right? And that kind of goes to also to show like what's in there and the amount of code base and stuff like that. So the one thing is that given the fact that software does bloat over time, I think we need to think not only in terms of what's the minimum, right? What's the minimum that we can give a certain, but like what's the optimal size that even will allow us to run the bare required set of tools that the employees need to run, right? So it is about kind of, yeah, for sure we don't want to over provision from straight from the top, but if you go with the what's the minimum resources mindset, you're going to probably end up with a bad user experience. And another thing is, and that's a pretty trivial comment, everybody knows that, but I think, yeah, for sure, RAM and CPU is important, but so many times we see that IO is killing everything, right? It's not. It sometimes may look like it's a RAM or a CPU issue, but when you start looking at storage and start looking at latency and throughput of the storage subsystems, that's when it really makes a difference. And the best, sometimes it doesn't even show in the metric that much, but once you upgrade the storage, that's when you start feeling, the actual difference with, especially with the heavy stuff, right? And the other way around, right? It's when everything is really, really bad in terms of user experience. So many times I'm seeing that's actually IO, right? So that's another thing to take into account when sizing. And obviously,
Perfect.
sizing IO is much more complex than sizing CPU or RAM, for that matter.
Speaking of metrics, Marcus asked a question: is ControlUp planning to release some metrics/KPI reports for business verticals? For example, 20% of the hospitals using Citrix on 2019 with an average login duration of 25 seconds.
So I kind of feel like a lot of this is my area, but yeah, definitely. Like I wanted, maybe I'll make it into a question, which is going to be also involving an opinion from Sam, from Doug and Simon. Because what I'm seeing is, I mean, we do have a lot of, let's say healthcare. Okay, let's take Marcus's example, and let's take healthcare around the world. We do see a lot of healthcare organizations from around the world, and I can take those separately and kind of look at what the numbers say about healthcare versus other industries. The thing is that without getting into the very deep weeds in terms of like methodology and research methods, the problem is very simple. Different healthcare customers differ from each other way farther than the industry of healthcare differs from, say, entertainment or, government, right? So the variance inside the group between the different hospitals, the logon duration, application load time, or user input delay, or any other metric that we look at, like it varies within the organization for sure. But then if you choose like one metric to represent that organization, you're going to get any number of other hospitals in the same country or in the same continent or in the same planet Earth. You're going to get very big variance between those different customers, if it makes sense. And if we compare that group of all the healthcare customers to like all government customers or all, I don't know, startups, right? The variances that we get inside those groups are much larger than the variances between those groups. And that basically means that the comparison itself is not very meaningful. And the stats, even though when I tell the healthcare IT people, hey, this is a number that comes from the healthcare industry, yeah, sure, it sounds relevant, right? Because it comes from the same industry, but it doesn't represent anything that's really special about that industry because the different customers really, really vary, right? If that makes sense. So if you guys have thoughts on that, on like what could be, because we did publish some stuff that is more like focused, for example, on verticals like healthcare, specifically on healthcare. We can do stuff like that for different, I mean, sometimes marketing wise, it sounds appealing, but in terms of the numbers itself, I find it far better and more effective and more compelling to just talk about larger samples, right? So this is what we're getting from everywhere, from the entire world. It's just the insights are so much more powerful. But your thoughts, guys, also.
No, I think it's a good idea, right? I mean, we've just released a report on the physical side of things, right? So nothing to do with VDI, but if we look at our physical desktops, 750,000 machines were in our study. And we basically went through and worked out, okay, of those machines, how many of them have upgraded to Windows 11, how many were ready to go to Windows 11 and how many were going to need to be replaced. And it was an interesting statistic, right? It's like, 11% of that install base were running machines that weren't going to run Windows 11 and were going to have to be replaced. So good news. That means that there's a ton more machines out there that are ready and can be migrated to Windows 11, even if that meant that some of them needed an upgrade or perhaps a configuration setting changed. But there's nothing stopping us probably going back and doing a state of the nation, and perhaps we should look at doing, as a business, we should look at doing it on a yearly basis, right? Even just to answer that simple question, right? Like, what specification are people using now when it comes to CPU and RAM to deploy VDI? We can get that information, and maybe we should look at publishing it. It'll only help people as per some of the questions asked. So I think that's a good idea.
Love it. Love it. This is a great question. So monitoring solutions traditionally have been used in the domain of the IT admins, level 3. The user experience is directly affected by the interaction with the service help desk. How can the DEX tool? Okay, thank you. How can the DEX tool be brought from level 3 to help desk, as there are so many different ITSM tools? That was very difficult for me to see.
Yeah.
So,
sorry, go on, Sam.
Yeah. Like that's something that we see on the field. Like I'm doing like a lot of POCs, and I'm doing also sometimes post-sales activities. So we can see that, we moved from a troubleshooting tool for experts, like the Citrix admin, the Citrix geek that wants to fix the issue of logon time. And now we are talking even now to other people, and other people is like Helpdesk is a nice thing, but we start talking to HR because they are interested on the user experience to keep their talent. But the way the DEX tool will move, and that's the transition is already started. It's by providing full airbag capabilities. That's the first step. The second step, you talked about ITSM. So most of the DEX solution, including ControlUp, have integration with them. Like we have a plugin for called Enrich, I think, that connects to Intune and ServiceNow, for example. So that's the way, and you can consume whatever DEX tool solution you are using from the vendor console or from the Helpdesk tool you're already using, because your user are already trained. That's usually a job that you don't keep for long. So you have a lot of turnover in Helpdesk position. So you need the tool to be easy to use, because otherwise you will have too many training to do to your users. And secondly, you need to have a way to consume the data that you are providing a DEX tool with on the tool that they are already using. Like adding an extra console sometimes is not a possibility, because no, they are only on ServiceNow and they only want to deal with ServiceNow. So that's the reason why we bring the data, and most of the tech solution now are doing that, like bringing the data into the console they are already trained on. That's my experience.
From ControlUp perspective, it's interesting, because I think even if we would have looked before the inception of DEX as a concept, right? Even if we look 4 or 5 years ago, I would argue that the number of level 1 and 2 support people who are actually using ControlUp, in numbers, it was probably comparable to the number of level 3 admins that were using it. And for the larger organizations, it was probably more, right?
Mm-hmm.
So probably more front level people that were like actually interacting directly with. I have a few anecdotal examples in mind, but I feel like they're kind of representative because yeah, in numbers it definitely makes sense, right? Because they would have like a large customer will have a few dozen people working in the support help desk, right? And they would all be using ControlUp. That wouldn't be just like this one. And many times it would start with the admin, and then we developed some basic RBAC capabilities, and even before that, it would already trickle down to that to the support team. So I feel like maybe I mean, we didn't start that fire for sure, but it was there, right? It was there already a few years ago, right? So people were definitely getting into the details of monitoring when it comes to end user activity. The blur, yeah, I mean the boundary between like what's level 3 business and what's level 1 and 2 business is pretty blurry, I think.
Mm-hmm. And that
Yeah.
that it was we could see it in the development of the tool. Like we were used to have a heavy console. Like that was very hard to get to the help desk, because if you have like 50 or 100 user at help desk, you need like a Citrix farm to
And they do, and that
yeah,
people still
and
do.
they were using it. So
Yeah.
we are old enough to know quite well the AV console, or the
Uh-huh.
Windows 32 console. So it's, yeah, and the product evolved to get much simpler with like the web solve Dex console.
Yeah, I think some of this could well be the fact that the majority of what we did historically was in the Citrix VDI world, right? Um, you know, those that those that looked after um, VDI and Citrix and VMware, etc., and used our tool typically would have been probably more like an L3. I think what I definitely see as we do more and more on the physical desktop, we are spending more and more of our time having to educate not just third but second and first, as they start to use it, not just as a DEX tool, but start to replace quite a lot of the RMM tools that are out there as well. There are hundreds of customers, even just this year, who are wanting to implement a DEX tool and are getting value from having DEX on the physical endpoint, but at the same time replacing some of their remote control, remote management tools at the same time. And that is driving us all the way down to level 1 on the support desk, as more and more people, even our smallest customers, right? Me and Sam were on the phone with a much smaller customers today, physical desktop only, no VDI. They're doing like 450 remote connections every single week, right? From the tool. That's first line support people, remote connecting, remote shell, whatever it might be, transferring files, etc. So I think as DEX becomes better understood and matures, and we do even more on the physical desktop, I think you'll start to see more and more people using it on first and second line as well as third. Good question.
Yeah, that's a good question. Along the same lines of that question, and a lot of what we've been talking about, the evolution of what we're talking about, I guess, is how does DEX play a part in the future of delivering a workspace? Right, the EUC's everything's changing, right? EUC is expanding into
Yep.
Edge, and it was funny. You and I, Simon, were talking the last meetup, I think it was, and I mentioned US, or maybe it was our podcast, and I mentioned EUC, and you replied, "Well, you have to define what EUC means, right?"
Right.
So, yeah, so I'll just leave it at that. How does DEX play a
Okay.
part in this changing world?
Okay. So I'll be real quick. EUC does not equal VDI in my mind. EUC equals my workspace, my digital workspace. There are 4 of us on this Zoom call today, presenting at least with our cameras on. And my guess is that we are using 4 different types of workspace. Some of us are going to be on Mac, some of us on Windows, some of us will use cloud PCs, some of us won't. Today we're on
Actually,
Zoom.
I actually bet all of us are on Macs.
Are you on a Mac?
Am I right?
Sam's not on a Mac, is he?
Yes, he is.
Oh!
That's it. That's it. We're done for.
Point. I think we've
I'm
already,
sorry for interrupting.
no, it's fine. But we've
Good
already
point,
spoken.
Simon.
We've already spoken about it, right? Which is we are entering more of a hybrid world. We've just said that VDI is not going to be able to disappear. We talk about the rise of SaaS applications and how much money we're spending on SaaS applications every single year, but we can't get rid of the bottom 20% of Windows-based apps. So you've got hybrid applications, hybrid delivery work styles. The problem of being able to measure that and manage that is actually increasing, not decreasing. And I think that's the part that Dex can play.
Anyone else?
Or I'm talking absolute BS, and we're all just going to work on Macs, and we can all use Jamf. We can all use Jamf, and that's all you need. Job done.
I do think that it's interesting when there's many times when there's discussions about Dex and with customers that in the room full of the decision makers, when there's mostly decision makers in the room, the most prevalent hardware platform is Mac. That's what I'm saying. So yeah, it's definitely something to, because whenever you look at the hardware platform distributions published by all kinds of vendors, right? You always see Mac as a niche. It's always like not most of the. But when you talk about decision makers, and many times those are also going to be the noisiest people when it comes to DEX, right? With bad user experience, right? So the managers and the decision makers in the organization, they're going to be making the most noise when it comes to bad user experience, right? So and another point that like again, just an anecdote, but it kind of illustrates what's happening. I've been talking to a neighbor of mine, and as a physician, and he has like a surgical practice, and he actually recently hired a new intern or an employee to actually work in the clinic and prep the clinic from the IT perspective, right? Because he used to show up for an operation and do of the entire prep himself, right? The physical, like the sterilizing stuff and the tools and everything, and booting up the computer and preparing all the software that is needed for, to start the procedures. And at a certain point, he just got to a point where he needed someone that will do the IT preparations for him, because he would have, that would otherwise delay him more, because he would have need to sterilize only after he's done with all of that, right? So I thought it was interesting because it was actually, and I kind of asked, yeah, like, and you get those, I'm sure you get a lot of upgrades. You say, yeah, there's upgrades all the time, all the medical software, and a lot of it is cutting edge and it's great hardware, and it all gets upgraded all the time. But he says but everything keeps getting slower, right? So in terms of the user experience itself, things are getting slower. People are starting to, and so it's great that there's, like job creation in that, right? So it's now somebody's job to start all those computers and log on to them, right? Something that, the MD himself was able to do before that, and now he needs an employee to do that. But I think it does reflect some trend that is going on, this bloating of software, and the fact that it's becoming less efficient, and a lot of the things are, a lot of the processes are actually not becoming as fast as we would expect, giving all the upgrades to the hardware. The fact that user experience is not getting better at the same pace as our hardware is getting better. It leaves a lot of space for the future of this, and the focus on this is going to be, I think, Dex, in the broader sense. So both the speed with which we do things and the efficiency of UX and the actual, user interfaces, how they serve us in our jobs, and how they help us achieve tasks. And, AI comes to mind with that as well. So all of those things are probably, they all say to me that Dex is that's the calling, that's what people need right now, because complexity grows, software bloats, but people become less and less patient to all of that, right? So there's that's kind of intensifies the role of Dex.
I have a question about, we're talking about DEX, and security is a big thing too. ControlUp recently released Secure DX, right? How does security fit into this idea of digital employee experience? And, why is Secure DX part of what we're doing? Make sense?
Yeah, because,
Who wants-
well, the way I see it, the people that are responsible for deploying and managing the workspace, and hence the people that are responsible for measuring employee experience, happen to be typically the same people whose job it is to make sure that those systems are patched, and are in compliance and are free of vulnerabilities. And too many times, what I see is security teams running tools on the endpoint, producing long lists of these devices are missing these patches, these devices are out of compliance, these devices have got a ton of vulnerabilities. Here's some new vulnerabilities we've just been made aware of. You need to go and check to make sure that we don't have any of these in our environment. It's the poor IT administrator, if I can call him that, and people like ourselves that are deploying and managing the workspace, that typically the buck stops with us. We have to go and do that assessment and do that remediation. And so for us, bringing Secure DX into our tool empowers the same people that are deploying the workspace to have those real-time insights into, are the security tools working? Are the patches being updated? Am I exposed? Do I have any vulnerabilities? And it gives them a way of resolving that. It's not true in every organization. It's not always as black and white as two different teams. But there's constantly been a balance between how do you ensure that users can be productive versus making sure that the environment's secure. And if I go back to the diagram that's on the glass, and we go all the way back to COVID, right? We know full well that we had to, let's say, forgo some of our security and turn down some of our controls to allow people to work from home and do what they want to do. And I think we're right at the point where, nope, people are now rethinking their strategy. Those laptops are 4 years old. Everything that's going on in the VDI world, loads and loads of organizations right now are looking at, what does my next 3 to 4 years look like? And how do I deliver a performant yet secure workspace? And I think for that reason, that's why we brought Secure DX in. And it's proving extremely powerful, right? And again, I come back to even cloud PC, Secure DX on a cloud PC, right? Spin up. I spun up a Windows 365. In fact, I shouldn't say that. I spun up a cloud PC the other day, brand new, no names mentioned. Secure DX went on it, and it immediately found 4 vulnerabilities on a brand spanking new machine. And so, yeah, I'm the person that's deploying that workspace. I want to know, is it performing? I want to know, is it secure? And that's why Secure DX becomes part of our DEX platform.
A quick comment about that. It's like the way I see it, when we first introduced the integration of ControlUp with the virtualization layer. So I got the same question about the virtualization tools, right? So like people were asking, hey, what is ControlUp like trying to replace, like vCenter or like the vSphere operations suite, and all the monitoring tools and everything.
VROPS.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
VROPS and all of that. And I was like, when we first gave it to users, meaning VDI admins, they looked at it for like 3 seconds and they learned stuff about their virtualization infrastructure that their great virtualization teams with their very expensive tools weren't able to say for months or years sometimes, right? So that's like, it was so fascinating to see. So in so many customer sites, we saw that the virtualization admins then said, "Hey, I want a piece of that as well," right? Or either that, or then they started collaborating better because knowledge is a kind of this gap, right? So people have there's stuff that one team knows and the other doesn't know, and that turns them into the more powerful team. That's one aspect of it, and another aspect of it is also the fact that vulnerabilities or security issues are not just some guy's fault or his problem, right? Or some dude from the security team perceives it as their problem versus like VDI resources is another person's problem. This is all organizational IT. This is all business, right? In the end of the day, if resources are bad, business suffers. If security is bad, business is going to suffer, right? So what I'm seeing is with Security X, we're not looking to replace the entire, plethora of security tools and scanning and that apropos the question that Mitchell is asking here, right? So I don't see us going into like this scanning everything as deep as possible in terms of like replacing a lot of other security tools. But I think it is important to deliver just enough capability that makes the DEX EUC people aware enough and capable enough to actually deal with the things on the security side, and B, make this more of an our problem versus their problem, right? Because I do think it is kind of important in the context of IT. It has become, organizational IT has become very siloed over time. And I think that any problem that is our problem is dealt with usually more efficiently and better than my problem or his problem or their problem, right?
Yeah. I just started sharing my screen, Doug, just to answer Mitchell's question there.
That's perfect. Absolutely perfect.
Yes, in answer to your question, SecureDX is part of the platform. Get a new icon here. We scan the device every single day. We check for vulnerabilities, missing patches, third-party patches, operating system patches. We check for misconfiguration. So in my particular case, there's a couple of policy settings, Windows policy settings that should be enabled that have been disabled. So we're checking for that. We're looking at security controls to see whether certain controls that should be installed are installed and enabled. In our case, checking here for CrowdStrike, and then making sure that a whole host of compliant checks are done. We can even put custom checks in there to check for missing files, missing registry keys, registry values, whatever it might be. And that data then all gets uploaded and presented in a number of different ways. You can slice and dice that data in a couple of different ways, either based on issues, based on users, because that might be more important to you, based on applications, so you can see what applications are out of date and need updating, and or devices. And we take the same smart prioritization that we've got in the rest of the product through to SecureDX, prioritizing those devices, those applications that have got the highest number of CVEs, the ones that are most critical, and also the applications that are in most use. And we give you the ability to choose whether you just want to assess or whether you want to remediate as well. So yeah, 100%. When I talk about ControlUp replacing remote control tools within our physical endpoint or virtual product like Splashtop and TeamViewer, we do that. And when I look at SecureDX and you look at Patch My PC and other types of technologies, then 100%, yeah, vulnerability assessment, patch management can all be done from the same platform. I feel like I've just done a sales call. Do I get commission?
You should be pre-sales.
Let's get some deals first.
Well, it's at the top of the hour. I do have one last question that was submitted to me. It was a rather strange one, and I don't know. Maybe it was Sam that submitted it. But it says, Sam is super smart. How can he be so smart? So, Sam?
I will be smart. I don't know.
No, it depends. You should say it depends.
It depends. Like, that's my hair color today. That's blue. Vive la France.
Yeah, thank you. I thank you guys for taking the time to do this with us today. And I thank you everyone for joining, asking questions. You know, the chat's amazing. And please, in the future, let us know different topics for, you know, things we can do with you, webinars, meetups, you know, what have you. Just please, you know, speak up. We love it. On that note, I think it's the top of the hour. You guys have things to do. So we'll call it a day. Sound good? Any last words, comments, suggestions from anyone?
Been great. Thanks, Doug, for pulling this together.
Paul, reach out to me on LinkedIn. The short answer is typically no, but give me a nudge or send me an email and we can talk further. simon.townsend@controlup.com.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's a good
that sounds
question,
a secret. That sounds a secret. Now I'm interested.
You just put one more question in there. Sorry, I just wanted to finish that up. Thanks, Doug. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you
guys.
all.
Cheers.
Take care, everybody.
Everybody, take
Have
care.
a nice evening, Eugene. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.